Everyone, Cork in the North podcast, thanks for joining us this week. We have a very special episode for you. This is the first time we've had an Ulster Unionist politician come onto the podcast on Cork in the North. We've had Naomi Long before, leader of the Alliance Party, and this week we had Mike Nesbitt, former leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, and now he's currently an MLA. Very excited to have got Mike onto the podcast. I was very, very nervous about it before we did it. I did quite a lot of research on it. And then when we started the chat, I barely touched on anything that I researched. He was a great guest, very smart, very intelligent man. Learned a lot from him. Very nervous I was myself, I'll be honest with you, going through the actual podcast, because this is a little bit out of my comfort zone in terms of me interviewing politicians. But it's something that I wanted to throw myself into and get stuck into and see if I could swim, not sink. I think I did all right. I think Mike was a very generous host, very generous guest. But yeah, straight into the podcast. Thanks to everybody. Please do sign up to the Patreon, £3 a month. Really does help the podcast as well. And also you can see here we've got some beanie hats that have come in. You can order through the link on the Shopify down below there. You can buy some mugs and stuff like that. And don't forget, the live show this Sunday still has about 15 tickets or 16 tickets left. We've got a great lineup. Music from Tiernan Heffron, me and Aaron Butler. We've also got Declan Lawn, the writer of Blue Light, Shane Casey, Billy Murphy from the Young Offenders, Yasmin Sierra, 3 o'clock at the Duncairn, done at 5. Thanks to everyone that's bought a ticket so far. Go onto my Instagram, you know where to get these tickets. It's very, very straightforward. All right, but here's Mike Nesbitt, straight into it, and hope you enjoy it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Cork in the North podcast with myself, Andrew. Thanks to everyone that's been downloading and listening to the podcast recently. We've had record numbers of downloads as well. We do appreciate it as we continue to develop in this difficult environment of podcasting. As always, you can sign up to the Patreon as well, which is £3 a month for 3 to 4 extra episodes a month, discounts on tickets to the live shows, and also discounts on merch, and also discounts to my 2024 tour, which I'm going to be doing across the UK, Ireland, and in Europe as well. So we're going to crack straight into this one. A man that we've tried to get on the podcast many times. Some would call it harassment. I would call it gentle persuasion. But we're delighted to have him here. He is an MLA and has been an MLA for many, many years for Strangford. Mr. Mike Nesbitt, how are you?
I'm good, Andrew.
Really good to have you here.
Yeah, you got me in the end.
I got him in the end. We emailed him. This is how it started. Well, when we started this podcast, Mike, I said to producer Sean, I said, Sean, I want to start getting some people that are a bit different, that we may not see on podcasts as much. And Sean, in fairness to him, he said, get Mike Nesbitt. He's the soundest one of the lot. So there you are.
Okay.
And he's from the West, so it's fantastic. Do you know what I mean? So it's
I'm
great.
very close to signing up for £3 a month.
Can you imagine if Mike Nesbitt, MLA, was a patron? This is fantastic. I'll put you on the £5 tier, Mike. I think you'll be all right with it. Listen, thanks so much for coming in. As somebody growing up down in the south and living over in England, I've known about you for many years, and I must say I'm a big fan of you. I think you're one of the MLAs that I really do think that a lot of people can relate to. You come across very liberal, very progressive with unionism. And I'm going to read something to you, and I hope you don't mind me reading this to you.
Okay.
As somebody who was brought up in the heart of nationalist West Belfast, I just wish to say that I have had nothing but admiration for Mike Nesbitt. If only all unionist political representatives and nationalists who spoke with the same sincere, honest and forward-thinking views that Mike does, then Northern Ireland, Irish and British relationships would, without any doubt, be in a much more better and respectful place. That's somebody has written that about you. How do you feel when you hear something like that?
I feel really good because you get into it to try and make a difference, and in Northern Ireland terms it's about bringing people together. Yeah, it's the spirit of the 1998 agreement, whether you call it the Belfast or the Good Friday, because it's not an accident. I think that it starts, the first commitment on page 1 is a commitment to building relationships, based on tolerance of each other, based on reconciliation, mutual trust, offering each other mutual respect. So a message like that fits in and kind of makes me feel, I'm doing something right. Yeah.
No, you never kind of came out of university and went into politics. You started out in television. You were a journalist when you worked your way through UTV and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So this isn't something that you said, at 21 I'll run for election. I'll just do that for the rest of my life.
And I was an accidental broadcaster. And if you want the full background, I was supposed to be the third generation of my family to run the family business, which was Alfred Nesbitt and Co. Limited Linen Manufacturers, right in the centre of Belfast. Granddad started a linen firm. handed it over to his two sons. Uncle Jack I think he was 16 years older than Dad, so his son John had already decided he wasn't interested. So at the age of, I think it was 15, and I was being looked upon as the person who would eventually inherit the business, but it was blowing up. 25th of January 1973.
Wow.
And that was the end of it, because Jack was so much older than Dad. By the time the compensation came through, he was retired and he didn't want to put his half of the money back into the business. And so,
Who blew it up?
IRA.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So when I came back from uni, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd signed up to do a postgrad at Queen's. And just on a notion, I wrote to the BBC sports department and said, could I write reports for somebody else to read out?
Wow. And
it turned out they were desperately short of weekend workers to work on radio, to go to football or Gaelic or whatever, squash, and do the reports over the phone. So the boss, a wonderful woman called Joy Williams, she phoned me up and explained if I wanted to get into it, I would have to broadcast. And I was really reluctant, but then I thought, well, this is the only way to do it. So I did an audition, which I'll tell you about if you want, and got into the BBC Sports Department. I was there for 6 years, Andrew, and not once over those 6 years were they that short of weekend workers. So if I'd applied a month before or a month after I wrote in, you'd probably never have heard of me.
Wow.
Because the response would have been, sorry, but thanks, but no thanks.
You hit the sweet spot then.
Yeah, just got timing absolutely right. And that's, I think I'm the world's luckiest man in terms of timing, because every time I think it's time for a change, something comes up.
Wow. And you then you went over to UTV, is that right?
Yeah, but it was 10 years at the BBC.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky to get in, because the boss, Joy, she phoned up and she said, go and watch something over the weekend, write up a report and come in at 10 o'clock Monday morning. We'll have a coffee and have a chat. So I am not a cricket fan, and I still don't know why I decided to go and watch a cricket match. I think it was because I used to drink at the Civil Service Club in East Belfast. So I said to my bestie, Trevor, I'm doing this thing, I'm going to watch the cricket, going to write up a report. And Trevor said, I'll come with you. So he says, what time do we meet? And I said, cricket lasts all day, 11 o'clock. So we met in the car park of the Civil Service Club at 11 o'clock. And there were no cars in the car park. And the pavilion was closed. And there was no cricket. So at about 10 past 11, Gordon, who was the bar manager, pulled up and he got out and he said, what are you at, lads? And we said, we're here for the cricket. And he says, cricket doesn't start for a couple of hours. So what are you going to do? You're going to go away and come back? Or do you want a pint?
There you go.
And Gordon stood us a pint. Trevor bought a round, I bought a round, Trevor brought a round, I brought a round. I woke up on Sunday with a hangover from hell. I hadn't seen a single ball bowled. I'm 24 hours away from going into the BBC to meet this frightening woman called Joy Williams for an audition.
Wow.
So I phoned Trevor and he says, don't worry, I know where Harry Cavan lives. Now, Harry Cavan was the senior vice president of FIFA, football's world governing body. And I happened to know he lived in Dundonald, and so did Trevor.
Yeah.
So I believed him. Trevor picks me up, drives me to Dundonald. We're doing our third lap. We're coming up to the same T-junction for the third time. And I say to Trevor, you're a great mate, but let's face it, you haven't a fecking clue where Harry Cavan lives. And as I am saying that, across the road, a garage door is slowly opening up and over. And it reveals a lawnmower, a pair of corduroy trousers, a string vest, and the face of the second most powerful man in world football.
Wow.
And it turned out Harry Cavan would do anything to avoid cutting the grass. And he gave me an interview. It was actually an interview about an All-Ireland football team. And I wrote it up and I took it in and did the audition with Joy, got the job. She told me about 2 years later, we were having a drink one Saturday, and she said, I have interviewed and auditioned dozens of young men like you, and your audition was outstanding. Outstanding because it was one of the worst performances I've ever heard. But because you'd had the cojones to go and interview Harry Cavan, we couldn't let you go.
Wow.
So if I had stayed sober and watched the cricket, I would have failed the audition. And do you know what we were drinking? A beer called Double Diamond. Doesn't exist anymore. Double Diamond. Their slogan, Double Diamond works wonders.
There you go. That's a great story how to start. To all our listeners, if you want to get anywhere in life, just get pissed. That's basically Mike Nesbitt's advice. If you want to work for the BBC, get pissed and approach people in their houses.
Times have changed.
So you do that for 10 years at the BBC. Now, you were just did you get in front of the camera much in the BBC? How did it work for you in there?
Yeah, so I was working kind of freelance weekends for the sports department, going out to matches for radio. And then the next summer, because the regular staff were going off on holiday, they said, we'll give you some weekday shifts, Monday to Friday, doing the sports bulletin desks on the radio. But 1980 was the year of the Moscow Olympics. The boss, Joy, she went to the Olympics with the European Broadcast Union. And one day the phone rang and it was Jim Neely, who was the main TV guy. And Jim had glandular fever. So he was out for something like 6 weeks. And the TV producer, Matt, he spent the morning phoning, trying to get people. So there was a guy called John Bennett who would stand in for Jim. But John was in a caravan in France, no mobile phones. The other guy who stood in was Seamus McKee. He was in a cottage in Donegal, no phone. So at midday, Matt turned to me and he said, son, you and I may go for an early lunch so you can get home for a shirt, tie and jacket.
Oh, wow.
And that night, I did the sports bulletin on the TV.
Do you still have a copy of that? Is there a clip of it going around somewhere, do you know?
No, there's probably artist's impressions in black and white.
And were you nervous doing it?
I was so nervous, I couldn't even shake.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that the jaw muscles were able to move. I suppose things like that happen accidentally, don't they? You know what I mean? Like you get trust in, you go, right, you've got to sink or swim here now, you've got to go for it. Yeah, so I got a run of about 3 weeks, I think, before Joy got back from the Olympics, and she didn't even know. You know, and she said, we'll have to stop you. And the news editor said, absolutely not. The guy's been doing it for 3 weeks, so he's going to continue.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And you were there for a long time, but then when did your parting happen with the BBC then? How did that work?
Well, I did 6 years with the sports department, and again, you know, when I went in, I would have been a rugby aficionado. And Joy said to me, you know, what sport would you most like to cover? And I said rugby, and she said, well, a guy that's just started a few months ago, a guy called Jim Neely. And I thought to myself, do I want to wait for Jim to move on? He might get promoted, he might go to London, or should I just kind of cut my losses and go for soccer? So I went for soccer. Now, if I had waited for Jim Neely, I'd still be waiting.
Wow.
44 years later, I would still be waiting for Jim to move on. And I went for soccer. And what happened was, at the end of 81, Northern Ireland qualified for the World Cup finals. Yeah. Spain 82. First time at the World Cup for, 24 years. I had no notion that I'd be anywhere near the World Cup finals. But coming up to Christmas, Joy called me in her office and said, I'm going to offer you a 1-year contract, but there's one condition. And I thought, what's it going to be? And she said, the condition is you have a valid passport. Because Alan Green, who was the football guy,
the BBC guy, Alan Green, he's still kind of going. He's still going.
Yeah, well, he's just retired. Yeah. So Alan was the main man in Belfast, but he'd just got a job with the BBC over in England. So she said, Alan's going to England, so you'll be going to Spain for the World Cup finals. And then in the autumn, you and I will be going to Australia to cover the Commonwealth Games in Brisbane.
What a terrible condition.
The world's luckiest man. You're looking at him. You're looking at him.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And this is from a guy that ended up going to the cricket at the wrong time. Do you see how the domino effect, that knock-on effect that you
Double
have?
diamond. Double dunder. And then, of course, they got to 2 World Cups in a row.
Yeah.
So I was in Mexico in 86, commentating on Northern Ireland against Brazil.
Good crack.
Oh, it was fantastic.
How old are you at this point? Don't mind me asking.
Well, 86, I would have been late 20s.
So you're having a great time.
I'm living my best life.
Yeah.
And my big regret is this. 86 is, how long ago is that? 37 years?
Yeah.
I am still the last Northern Irishman to commentate on Northern Ireland at a World Cup finals.
Wow.
And I would so love to pass that mantle on.
Wow, yeah, because obviously, yes, we went to the Euros in 2016, but that's been it since, really, isn't it? I went to the Euros 2016 for the Republic. Oh, wow, yes, and like Scotland have just qualified, Republic haven't, Northern haven't for the next Euros.
Wales are struggling.
Wales drew there last week. They shouldn't have drawn. And I never actually thought about that because in 1980, what was his name? What was the goalkeeper? Pat Jennings. He just had his thing down in Newry, wasn't it?
That's right, the statue.
Last couple of weeks.
And he had his, I think it was his 41st birthday was in Mexico, in Guadalajara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And did you get to meet all the players when you were covering them? Did you get to interview them with, like, was there different, did you get much access in the 80s?
You had fantastic access. I think in Spain in 82, the only two teams who let journalists stay in the team hotel were ourselves and Germany.
Oh, right.
So we stayed in the team hotel. So, when you were getting your half hour in the sun by the swimming pool, the players were there. You had total access.
Unbelievable. It was an amazing thing to feel part of as well, wasn't it? That so privileged as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and of course the players have a lot of time to kill because you're not training 18 hours a day. So they're sitting around maybe reception at the hotel and you're having a chat.
And there's no social media and they're not worried about things and being seen and spotted and all that, no internet, all that kind of stuff, Back in those days it was the landline and it was like you have to stand here for a phone call and wait for the phone call.
You better believe it,
And how did you report back then? Did you pick up a phone and ring Belfast and read it out?
Well, no, I was doing TV for those two. So you would shoot your piece and then you would get in a car and you'd drive to the broadcast centre because you would have slots, satellite slots.
Right.
And you'd send your stuff back.
Amazing. Yeah. And then, was it because, when did you decide to move on then from the BBC?
Well, after the second World Cup in Mexico in 86...
You peaked really then, didn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, what's next?
Yeah. And so at two Commonwealth Games, at two World Cups, I just thought... Plus, the troubles were going on, and a lot of the sports reporting you do is into news bulletins. And you're sitting there and you're listening to the news guys talking about the latest person to be murdered, the last thing to be blown up. And you're sitting there and you're going to say, Martin O'Neill's going to miss the next match because he's got a thigh injury or cruciate ligament injury. And you're just thinking, this isn't right.
Yeah.
I can't be doing this the rest of my life, particularly after what happened to my father when the business was blowing up. Because if you think, I always think about a passage from Charles Dickens in Great Expectations when he talks about memorable days in people's lives. And what he means is a day that shapes the rest of your life. And he describes it as a day that wraps you in a chain. And if it's a good day, that chain's made of gold and roses. But if it's a bad day, it's iron and it's thorns. And for so many thousands of people, the story of the Troubles is a memorable day that's wrapped them in chains of thorns.
Yeah.
And when they pass on, they don't take the chains with them. Those chains get passed on intergenerationally to the next son or daughter or nephew or niece. And I just felt I need to do something more than sit here and enjoy being a sports reporter. So the opportunity came up to present Good Morning Ulster. I just started the blue, and I put my hat in the ring and ended up doing that for 4 years.
Wow.
And I couldn't tell you the number of times I went to bed at 10 o'clock, having just spoken to the producer, so thinking I know exactly what we're doing tomorrow, but you go in at 5 o'clock, somebody's been killed.
Yeah.
Something's been blown up. And so I did that on my own, sole presenter, 5 days a week for 4 years. That was stressful. It was a tough shift. One of the first things I covered was the Enniskillen Remembrance Day in 87. And I remember going in on the Sunday afternoon for a planning meeting and feeling really nervous. And there was this remarkable debate around the table where people were saying, I think it started with, we need the chair of Fermanagh Council because he's Sinn Féin. And then somebody said, no, it's more important than that. We need Gerry Adams. They said, well, if we have an Adams, then we need John Hume. And if we need John Hume, we need Jim Molyneux and we need Ian Paisley. And then somebody said, oh, we need the Secretary of State. Somebody said, no, it's bigger than that. We need the Prime Minister. And I'm pretty sure somebody said we should pitch for the President of the United States. The Pope may have got a mention. And the senior news guy, the late Paul Robinson, who was a genius, he stood in the door frame, just leaning against the frame, smoking a cigarette, as you could in those days. And he let the conversation play out. And then he said, can I say something? And of course, you're the boss. He said, all that politics is really, really important, and you're going to have to put those bids in. But let's not forget, there are dead people in the streets of Enniskillen, and we don't know who they are yet.
Yeah.
And there was a guy called Charlie Warmington, who was a producer, who was from Enniskillen, who'd already said he didn't want to go back. But when Paul said that, he got up, he said to another reporter called Mike Gaston, he says, come with me. And they got in Charlie's car. He drove to Enniskillen, parked up outside a house, knocked the door. The man of the house opened the door, looked at Charlie and said, Charlie, she was always very fond of you. And that was Gordon Wilson, who gave the most powerful interview you'll ever have heard during the course of the Troubles. He lay in the rubble of the bomb, holding his daughter's hand as she died. And he gave an interview that night forgiving the bombers. And I think he probably averted a civil war with his words and his forgiveness.
Wow. It's very powerful, that kind of stuff, isn't it, when you look back? You think about it, was stuff like that really inspire you to get into politics? Was it, or what was it that kind of drove you from
I think
media?
it all goes back to the memorable day, the bomb, because that got me interested in the human cost of conflict. You know, watching my dad, he was 49 at the time of the explosion, and in the moment, every certainty in his life disappeared because he'd been brought up to take over. But every responsibility remained. He still had a wife, 3 young children, car, house, but suddenly no income stream to fund all these things. So I think that's where it all started.
Yeah. And you became elected in 2011 for the Ulster Unionists in Strangford, and then the following year you became leader.
Yeah, it was a bit
big
quick,
turnaround,
wasn't it?
short turnaround there, isn't there? What happened there?
Well, I was in a hurry.
But like 12 months in as an MLA, next thing, bish bash your leader.
Yeah, well, it was less than 12 months actually. Well,
was it?
I mean, what happened was, like, out of the blue, my predecessor Tom Elliott just decided that he didn't want to do it, and I spoke to him afterwards, and he said what was actually a pretty profound thing and self-aware thing. He said sometimes you get more done as a number 2 than as the leader. So he had made that decision that he wanted to stand down, and you know, my analysis was whoever takes over has got to do at least 5 years, to get a bit of stability in, and it's too early for me. And then I thought, well, you know, if the next guy comes in and does 5 or 10 years, it could be too late for me. So I got back to this, you know, luckiest man in the world, right time, right place. So I thought, I better give it a go. And a lot of people, particularly journalists, said, we know what you're at. You're pitching to be the deputy leader. But the feedback I was getting was, no, you're going to do this.
Yeah. And when you became the leader, to go from starting out the BBC, UTV, and now you're a leader of the Ulster Unionists in Northern Ireland, were you a bit like, oh no, what have I done, kind of thing? Like, or was it a bit like, oh, this is an opportunity now? Because obviously, when you became leader in 2012, you know, there had been the Good Friday Agreement, you know, it's been, nearly 15 years, there's been relative peace, people have been kind of moving on. I remember John Hume saying that after the Good Friday Agreement, he said that Northern Ireland needs to just be calm.
Yeah.
It needs a generation of just life, of just normal, going to the shop, and everyone needs to just come right down and just live your daily life, and everything just needs to boom. And
George Mitchell said he wanted to bring his newborn son, because he had a son born within a year of the agreement. He said he wanted to bring him to Stormont into the viewing gallery, and for the two of them to sit and listen to boring debates.
There you go. And when you became leader of the Ulster Unionists, at that time, you know, I was living in England at that time, where was politics in the North? Were you relatively calm? Were people actually working together, or was it still, or like, were you able to get some stuff done, or was there big, massive hurdles?
Yeah, it was okay, but it wasn't that long afterwards that myself and the other party leaders were called down to have a chat with Peter Robinson, who was First Minister, and Martin McGuinness, who was deputy, and they said, we're going to have a go at some of the issues that we didn't solve in 98, particularly legacy. And that's when Richard Haas and Megan O'Sullivan came in to do a round of talks, which was then followed by the Stormont House talks. So apart from the bread and butter stuff, yeah, we got into some pretty intractable issues very quickly.
What was it like being coming from doing the news and a journalist and for that, and now next thing you know, you're there, your father's business is blown up, and then across the way from you, you may see in the canteen Martin McGuinness, who was in the IRA.
Yeah.
So how do you figure that out in your head, that this is somebody that could potentially have been involved or know people that were involved in my father's in the business, family business, and yet here I am breaking bread and trying to get things done. How did you
with a guy who was an apologetic commander of the IRA?
Exactly. Like how did you reconcile that with yourself?
But I said to myself, how am I going to do this?
Yeah,
because he is unapologetic, and he may know the people who planted the bomb.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but I thought, well, I have to work with him. That's what I've signed up for, a campaign to get elected, a campaign to become the leader. So I've got to deal with that. So what we did was we went for a walk. We went for a very long walk around the grounds of Stormont. And we started almost inevitably with the past, and we couldn't agree. Because Martin's view, which would be a Republican view, is that unionism, my predecessors, left them no choice but to engage in armed resistance. And my view was always, well, Martin, actually, if you pick up a gun, you choose to pick up a gun. If you detonate a bomb, you choose to press the button. And he would say then, well, you didn't grow up in Derry the way I did, with the oppression and all the rest from unionism. And I said, no, you're right, but John Hume did. And John Hume made a different choice to you. So we had to just kind of park that. But we were able to determine that we both had a duty to build a better future for our children. And as we were finishing our walk, we were coming up to Carson's statue. And there were two women with push bikes, and it turned out they were Chinese tourists. But they had good English, and we got talking to them, and they said, is it possible to have a look inside that lovely big building? And we said, yeah, come with us. So they're pushing the bikes up the last bit of the hill. And I don't know if you know it, but there's a very large security hut.
I know, I've passed it.
Right.
I've gone in it. The airport security style.
So there's the airport security with the scanner and all the rest. You go through that, and then you're 50 yards up the hill to the Parliament building itself. So they're pushing the bikes, and they're looking at the hut and thinking, what do we do here? Do we take the bikes into the hut because there's barriers and blah, blah? Well, guy in the uniform comes out, screws his cap on, walks up to the barrier, presses a button. The barriers go up. Martin and I ignore the security hut, walk through, turn around and say to them, come on, come with us. And their jaws are down. They're going, what's going on, Who are these people? And we take them up, and there's a bike rack, so we get the bikes set up, take them in, we go up to another set of security guards, say, when's the next tour? They say, it's in 5 minutes, sir. So could you get these two lovely women on the tour? And they say, yes. So we shake hands. We've got to go and do business now. And they're just going, who the hell are these people?
Yeah, I didn't realise how...
who are these gods who can make things happen? And every time there was tension between myself and Martin over the remaining years of his life, he would say, do you remember the two Chinese tourists? And I sat with him, I think 3 different times. I went to see him. No note takers, no special advisors, just him and me sitting in a room the way we're sitting. And we discussed some really controversial issues. And if he had wanted to do me damage, he could have leaked to the media my views on X, Y, and Z. He never did.
Did you like him? Did you get to like him?
I felt...
I know, obviously, you know his past, but when you sit with him, you're kind of this kind of guy I could have a pint with, kind of thing.
I felt he had political integrity.
Yeah.
And that's something that's quite hard to say. Or should be hard to say, given his background and what the IRA did to my family. But it's the honest assessment of Martin McGuinness that,
I remember when Bill Clinton at his funeral said he fought, he made peace, he made politics. Do you know what I mean? That kind of always kind of like stood out. When I remember actually watching the funeral on YouTube. I didn't watch it at the time, but I watched it on YouTube and stuff. It was quite interesting. You must find it, coming from the unionist background and being with all these people, that you obviously, grown up and disagreed with and stuff like that. But we all have things in our life where we fall out with people. Like, I've fallen out with many people in my life, people in my family and stuff because of things. And I often think to myself, if they can reconcile and get to a point where they can work together, you know what I mean? I often think it as quite inspiring over small things as well. Like my girlfriend now, she comes from the British side of the north, right? She's from down Cloghey way. And we have a great bit of crack.
That's my constituency.
Yeah, I told her I was on today. I said to her, you were coming in. She was like, oh, very good. She just went, oh, very good. And I went, here's your M&A. She went, okay. Well, anyway. Yeah. I said to her one day, I remember I said to her, like, she came into the house one day and we were having a crack. And because I come from Cork and it was kind of like growing up, I would have had an interpretation of this place. 6-1 News, Morning Ireland and RT. Going to school when I was between age 12 and 16. I was going to school in Cork City. Punishment beaten, car bomb, petrol bomb, bomb, PSNI, kneecapping, drugs, suspicious package. It was, honestly, I could say 4 days out of 5 for 6 years of going to secondary school, I was numb to it. So in your head you're going, the mind them up there, like. But now that I've lived here, it's a completely different place than what I thought it was. The way people get on, it's fantastic. Like, my partner, I said to her, family come from the British side, I said, oh, you identify as British? She goes, no, I'm Irish, I'm British, whatever. Whatever gets me through airport security the fastest, I'll pick that one. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I find it fascinating that a lot of people outside of the north don't see how well, and actually in my 3 years of being here, how peaceful this is. And I've lived in London, I've lived in Manchester, and I actually feel safer here out in East Belfast than I've ever felt living outside of Cork.
Well, in terms of police statistics, we are either the second safest or the safest region of the United Kingdom.
Wow, it's mad, isn't it? But the perception is that you're all at each other. Do you know what I mean? When it's not. It's kind of like not like that. And that's what some people have said to me. When I go down to Cork, like, what are you doing up there, kind of thing. Like, and I'm like, well, it's 30% cheaper cost of living, it's free healthcare, crack.
But it only takes one incident, like the attempted murder of DCI John Caldwell, and that's headlines globally. Yeah, and that just enforces. That's a place where they're. And
you'll hear stuff about the drug gangs, the UDA, the UVF, or whatever these people are doing. But then you go, well, what about the Kinahan cartel down in Dublin, like, and the shootings at the boxing, and like, there's problems in every city.
Yeah, but the problem is the Kinahans are in Belfast now.
Are they?
Yeah.
So there you go. Like, it's it's not just a Northern Irish. Like, I find, like, I mean, you would have seen so many differences from the 80s until now, don't you?
Oh, totally.
I mean, it's a completely different place.
Even the infrastructure, even Belfast, to look at it. I mean, there was a movie made about Belfast in the 70s. I think, was it called 1973? I can't remember. Anyway, they had to film it in Bradford because Bradford looks more like Belfast of the 1970s than Belfast does. Wow.
That's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
So it's great progress.
Yeah, it is great progress. I saw you at the Oxford Union. You were doing the thing you talked about, the Oxford Union, which I thought was great.
Oh, that was great fun.
It was great fun.
Because Colm Eastwood arrived to be the main speaker in favour of the motion. And I'm not sure he had actually twigged what the exact wording of the motion was, which is Ireland is ready for reunification. He couldn't argue that case.
Yeah.
And he was the main proponent of it. He couldn't look me in the eye. The whole 8 minutes that he was on his feet, I was trying to get his attention, and he knew I was, and he refused to look at me.
Yeah. But before I want to go into a little bit of that, do you know the other people like Naomi and Colm and Jeffrey Donaldson and all that kind of stuff? Do you have good crack? Or are you still very like, just a smile and nod? Or is there a bit of crack, do you actually see each other much? Do you get on much? Like,
well, I don't, because I'm not in the leadership role anymore. But yeah, when I was in the leadership role, because you had House O'Sullivan and then you had Stormont House, you were having these negotiations as well as the day-to-day running of the country up at Stormont. So you would, because you spend a lot of time sitting around as a politician, particularly in talks.
Yeah. When I was watching the Oxford Union thing, and I've heard you quote this a couple of times, the poet John Hewitts, where you say you're an Ulsterman, Irish, British, and European.
Yeah.
And obviously with Brexit, that's kind of like dented one of them there in terms of the European, right? And Brexit has seemed to have caused I voted in your EU referendum. I'm from Cork, and I voted in the EU referendum. Right, this was I was living in England. I voted Remain, and I voted Remain, and I couldn't believe it when it happened. I genuinely couldn't believe it. Right, and one thing that really annoys me, by the way, going off from point, is the fact that Nigel Farage is now in a celebrity jungle in ITV, getting paid 1.5 million when this guy peddled so many bloody lies and mistruths, which has consequences for this part of the island today with no Stormont. How do you feel after that vote and where we are today? How far, how close? Have you had a quick chat with Jeffrey? Where is Stormont now? There's the Windsor framework. How close are we? How far are we from getting something up and running?
Well, first of all, on the Hewitt quote, he went on to explain why it was important to have that multiple identity. He said, if you deny me any part of that, you will diminish who I am.
Yeah.
And that's what Brexit has done for so many people on this island. And in this jurisdiction, it is mostly, but not exclusively, nationalists, because they would define themselves as Irish and European, the same as everybody on the other side of the border. So there was a link across the border.
Yeah.
And they believe that Brexit broke that link. By denying them their Europeanness, they feel diminished about it. And so there are people I have met who previously would have said, if the two questions you asked me were, one, would I like to see a united Ireland someday? And two, will you sign up to be an activist? The answers would have been, yes, I want to see it. But no, I'm not going to be an activist because I'm too busy enjoying life, earning good money, having my children well educated and all the rest. After June 2016, the answer to the two questions is yes and yes. Where do I sign up? So it's been a disaster for Northern Ireland. It hasn't been good for the United Kingdom, but it's been particularly bad for us.
Do you think with the Oxford Union thing, what I talk about is Ireland ready and all this kind of stuff that you were doing, and you said something there, but I haven't heard anybody say we want you. You know what I mean? Coming from like a unionist background, and when I was kind of listening to it, I was kind of saying to myself, I heard Patrick Healy say something where he says, like, the furniture has to change. If the island was to be united, the furniture has to change. For example, you could have a DUP, a UUP, TD/MP, in the Dáil, as a spokesperson on transport. So people have to realise that we have to welcome people in. Would that be?
Yeah, a message that I've taken to Dublin, which has shocked a couple of elected representatives down the years, is if we move to the traditional 32-county single sovereign state, do you realise unionism may hold the balance of power in perpetuity? So do you want, as it was then, do you want Arlene Foster choosing your Taoiseach?
Yeah. But we have to get on board.
Well, do you, punk?
But we have to get on board with that as a potential.
Well, if you went for that model.
If you went for that model, yeah.
No, I'm in a unionist minority, perhaps of one, just me. But I look at things and I think, well, change is inevitable. Change is inevitable. That's life. That is the human condition. The least likely outcomes of change constitutionally, I believe, are the status quo and that single 32-county, single sovereign state. So if the landing zone is somewhere in between those two, why are unionists not in the room negotiating the landing zone that they want? And when I say this, the status quo currently involves the Protocol/Windsor framework. Well, no unionist wants that, so no unionist wants the status quo. No nationalist wants the status quo because they want constitutional change. This is a unique position in the 102-year history of Northern Ireland, where nobody in politics in Northern Ireland either wants the status quo, which is not to say everybody wants the constitutional change that nationalists and Republicans want. But isn't that remarkable? Nobody wants the current status quo.
Politics is hard, but politics up here is an absolute minefield. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
What would you need to hear if a citizens' assembly was set up in Dublin and it went on for, say, 10 years? What would you want to hear from people down south to make you feel welcome and valued if there was a 32 united island?
I'm afraid I'm going to answer that differently because it's a project that I'm kind of embarking on or trying to embark on. I want to know what people in this jurisdiction, what assurances, what systems they need in place so that they feel their identity is protected in the event of any form of change from this status quo.
for example, if I could say something to you, you could have somebody who's from County Antrim, they identify as British passport, British family. There's a 32 United Island. They have a child. Would that child be entitled to a British passport, or do they have to take an Irish passport? As somebody from the south, to me, I would say you could come up with a system that would allow people still to be British 100% on the island, as if. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, you see, I think that's already in place because of the 1998 agreement. You can be British or Irish or both. I don't think that would necessarily change in the event of constitutional upheaval. Right,
okay. So I think the big issues for a lot of people at the moment in terms of what would make them feel safe and valued and listened to if there was a 32 county would be the things that people need every day. Housing, education, pensions, services, healthcare. I kind of feel like a lot of people in the north that I speak to anyway, especially maybe in their 30s and stuff like that, is like they don't really... I don't notice that there's a massive identity issue amongst people. Do you know what I mean? I know maybe from a different generation, but like a lot of the younger people are whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? I think a lot of people are very interested in what's in the wallet and what's in the.
Yeah, and you're onto something by saying I think there's a generational thing, but for people in my background and my age, I'm going to give you 4 ironies and a paradox here.
Right.
And the first irony is the biggest obstacle to constitutional change for people like me was the IRA.
Yeah.
Because the bombs and bullets were an attempt to coerce me into something I didn't want. I think the second irony is that the organisation that's done most to put the constitutional debate back on the table, having seen it parked in 98, is the DUP, not least through their support for Brexit, as we've discussed. The third irony is unionists, by and large, don't realise that people who understand nobody's ready for a border poll are people like Micheál Martin, the Tánaiste, and to an extent Leo Varadkar, the Taoiseach. And the fourth irony is unionists have spent centuries looking over our shoulder, maybe at people like you, at people from a nationalist background and say, you're the big threat to our place in the union. The big threat to the union today is Scottish nationalism and above all English nationalism. And the paradox is anybody who looks at the referendum on Brexit for clues for border poll will say, don't go anywhere near the people till you've thought through what change would mean to the nth degree. And I'm talking about something as simple as, is that postbox still red or is it now green?
Yeah.
And if it's green, do you care? All the way up to those big ticket issues you mentioned. But paradoxically, the same people who realise that will look at me entering a debate and say, you're a Lundy, you're a traitor, you're a Judas.
Yeah.
Am I depressing you?
It seems like it's so difficult up here, isn't it? Like, like to do anything. Because, like, I feel, somebody said to me, like, that if Jeffrey Donaldson went back into Stormont tomorrow, that he'd probably be gone because of the DUP, so the extreme people in the DUP will try and get rid of him.
Yeah. Well, I hope I'm wrong. I absolutely hope I have to eat my words, but I think Stormont's gone. I think all the certainly open source information suggests nothing's going Jeffrey's way. The last Lucid Talk poll said that 2/3 of unionists think he's right to keep Stormont down. Suella Braverman's resignation as Home Secretary when she rubbished the Prime Minister doesn't make it easy because she's basically saying you can't trust that man. You've got Nigel Dodds, you've got Sammy Wilson, you've got all those people who are saying, Ian Paisley saying, no, hell has to freeze over, there has to be a seismic change. I just don't see it happening. And actually, if you think that the Sinn Féin narrative is that Northern Ireland is a failed ungovernable statelet, they're sitting back allowing the DUP to play their tune for them. So they seem to be quite comfortable.
Somebody said to me the DUP have done more for Irish unity than Sinn Féin. And, Republican nationalism. Something has to give. Sorry, Sean, go on.
No, on the topic of, other things to throw into the can of worms here, another thing is that who wants us is something I feel as, someone in this generation. It's like, as you rightly said, Mike, English nationalism feels like, they feel a lot more insular. And likewise, down south, looking at a state like Northern Ireland that's very heavily reliant on public funding, it costs a lot of money to keep this our public sector running from the British pocket costs more than it generates. You know, so that's money that would come out of, you know, Irish pockets. So it's whether anyone really wants us.
Should cut it off in New Dubai. Tax free.
Yeah, the fear, I think, particularly in terms of English nationalism, is that they weren't prepared to spend was it 8 or 9 billion a year for membership of the single European market, access to 500 million consumers. Our block grant, our annual subvention is now up at around 15 billion. It's a lot more than they paid to be members of the European Union. So if English nationalism starts focusing in on that and saying, hold on, that could be a new acute hospital in my constituency. That's Bobby's on the Beat in my town. That's classroom assistants for my kids in my schools. Then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
You know, would you go down south much?
Yeah.
Did you go down to been to Cork a few times? Been to Cork?
I haven't, not for a long time. I tend to go to Dublin because it tends to be political stuff.
Do you like it down there?
Yeah, yes, I do, and always get well received. I was down, I think, most recently for Maria Cahill's book launch.
All right.
And there were quite a few politicians there, and she was very kind to me, and I liked that. I'll be down in a couple of weeks' time in the Parliament because they're unveiling a bust of David Trimble. I went down to the Mansion House a couple of years ago for the centenary of the first sitting of Dáil Éireann.
All right.
And there were 400 people in the room. I was the only, certainly the only unionist politician, and very well received, except by a few. I felt there were a few members of Sinn Féin in the room whose nose were a bit out of joint. Because, of course, the narrative is unionists are insular, they say no, they won't engage. So I was wrecking their narrative.
Wrecking their head as well. But you are a politician that has crossed over, you know, and tried to make unionism a little bit more progressive. You know what I mean? What is it about unionism do you think is just holding itself back? Because, like, you know, I know that you change your views and stuff like that and stuff in the past. You spoke about in the Oxford Union about Ireland's the same-sex marriage, reproductive rights and all that, and you were impressed. Mm-hmm. You know, what is it about unionism that is just... We wrecking people's head.
We seem to have a difficulty about walking into a room full of people who think differently from us and explaining ourselves. To say, look, I'm a unionist, this is what I think, and importantly, here's why I think that way. And I don't know why we seem to be so reluctant, because it's actually one of the easiest things to do. I went to Féile an Phobal, the West Belfast Festival, and afterwards... I found the kind of reaction I got was, I don't agree with you, but fair play for turning up. So I'm still the only unionist leader to have engaged formally with the Irish Parliament in Leinster House. I went to the committee on the implementation of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And they were hanging off the rafters. And there was a lot of them were Sinn Féin, TDs, senators, MPs, you name it. And what I've found, and I've tested this many times, if you turn up, you'll get an audience. And the worst criticism you'll get is, I don't agree with your analysis, but fair play for turning up.
Yeah.
And I did it in Dáil Éireann, did it in the West Belfast Festival, did it with Martin McGuinness in Bundoran, of all places, where I was certainly the only unionist in the room. But the queue of people to shake my hand afterwards was a lot longer than Martin's, because they've had a handshake with Martin before. I was the new kid.
Yeah. How are other unionists in the DUP in reacting to you going and engaging and, you know, I suppose going down to the Parliament, hanging out with Martin? And how are they reacting to you?
I think electorally it's easy for them to have a go. But if you think about it, I mean, whatever about 100 plus years ago and partition, you know, there's in this part of the world, this little postage stamp on the world map, you've got loyalists, unionists, nationalists, Republicans, and others, or none of the above. Nobody's going away. So how are we going to muddle along together?
Get on with it, figure it out, find a way to work together.
As the agreement in '98 said, build relationships based on tolerance and reconciliation, mutual trust, mutual respect. You mentioned reconciliation earlier. What does it mean? At House of Sullivan and Stormont House, I said to the other 4 leaders, take a blank sheet, take 5 minutes and write me your definition of reconciliation, because I think we could end up with 5 very different definitions. And nobody disagreed, but nobody wanted to do it. And my definition is that it's in here, it's internal, and it's giving up all hope of creating a better past and focusing on a better future.
Yeah. Hopefully Northern Ireland will have a better future, because I've lived here for 3 years and I can honestly say I love the place. I genuinely love it. I didn't think I would. I came here by accident. I got stuck here in COVID and I stayed here, came here from London, bought a house, did it up, and eventually moved back to London because of my comedy career. And then when I was in London, I went, I actually really missed Belfast. And I came back, and my family have never have come up here. Never in a million years would they have driven for 4.5 hours from Cork to come up here. They love the place.
And, it is possible to form friendships with people who have different political philosophies from you. I mean, the late Seamus Mallon was what a fantastic guy. I'll tell you, if you've got time, a little story about Seamus. So, as a broadcaster, I always admired the late David Dunseith, who started off he was a police officer, he was a drug squad, and he was so articulate as a broadcaster that became his career. And I discovered he had what I called a 3-question technique, where if he's talking to you, question 1 would be the soft one to get you talking. Question 2 I called the nudge, where he would go, I'm particularly interested in what you said about X. So he's getting you onto the ground where he wants you. And then the 3rd question was the punch. You see. And he did it once with a politician on a phone-in. And the politician had made the terrible mistake of thinking, this guy likes my politics. And over the 3 questions, the first answer, the soft answer, was, well, Davy. The second answer was, well, David. And the third answer was, now look here, Mr. Dunseith. So I adopted this. And one day I went in to do Good Morning Ulster, and whatever the story was, to say, Seamus Mallon on the phone from London for the SDLP. And I thought, he's the man. Because he's a bit, he's feisty. He's the guy for this 3-question technique. So I tried it, and it worked perfectly. Got the punch in, and Seamus remained totally calm, answered the question. I had time for one more go, and he answered it calmly again. Ruined my day. I went in the next morning, new crew, new stories. It's Seamus Mallon on the phone from London. I said, well, he was on yesterday. And the producer said, well, it's unusual for sure, but it's their call. So we're on a taped report, and Seamus is live next. The producer comes in and taps me on the shoulder. I'm going to change one word here for decency's sake. So he says, here, I didn't hear yesterday's programme. I don't know what happened between you and Seamus Mallon. And I don't want this to affect how you're planning to do the interview, but you should know this. When I got him up on the phone, the first thing he said was, if that fecker tries to wind me up again today. And I asked him the soft question, and he went through me for a shortcut. He destroyed me verbally. 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in the Regency Hotel with my mate having a pint, and 2 pints are set in front of us by the barman, and I said, sorry, we didn't order. And he just nodded to the corner, and it was Seamus Mallon sitting at a table, and he just lifted his pint.
Wow.
As a cheers.
That's an amazing story. That's mental.
And I like to think we became actual friends.
And did you talk much after that and stuff, did you?
Yeah. And I went down to his house not long before he died, and I made a contribution to his book.
Wow, that's amazing. He's got some amazing stories, Mike, you know what I mean? Like, you've got some cracking stuff.
I've saved the best one for later.
You know, it's amazing. Do you like being an MLA? Do you like doing it? Is it stressful on you?
No, it's not stressful. I do enjoy it. What I really enjoy is helping people.
Yeah.
So when you're up at Stormont, when Stormont's working, it's great to pass laws, and I brought forward a private members bill that passed a bit of legislation on reforming the laws of defamation. That's wonderful. But you don't see the effect you're having. You do at constituency level. So like the guy who comes in because a public authority is about to take him to court, and we've been arguing, the guy's in the right and you're in the wrong, and they're going, no, he owes us, for sake of talk, $5,000. And I'm taking him around for the final meeting. And I'm actually worried he might self-harm because he's really down, and I'll not go into the details. But I'm really worried about the guy. And we go round and we have the meeting, and the guy comes in from the authority, and he says, look, first of all, Mr. So-and-so, two things. Mr. Nesbitt's team have been arguing that we're wrong, and actually he's right. So I owe you an apology for the unnecessary stress we've caused you. Secondly, you don't owe us a penny. In fact, and he produces a cheque, he says, this is what we owe you.
Wow.
And I walked back with this bloke, but it was a different man. A different man. And that was a Friday. You couldn't have annoyed me that weekend. I was a king.
You've changed his whole life?
We changed his life. And I'd seen it.
And that's the day-to-day stuff that you really like, when the single mom comes in or something like that?
And if you don't enjoy and get a kick out of doing that, don't stand for election.
That is mad. Do you know what? This is a true story that happened on Saturday. I was in London performing. I was doing 4 shows at the weekend. And this is something that I was in a coffee shop in West London near Notting Hill. And there was a lady sitting next to me in a coffee shop, probably, I'd say, late 30s, right? And she was telling her friend that her dad had just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Oof. And I'm sitting there, I've got my laptop, and I'm just pottering away. And I hear this girl, and she's saying, yeah, he's stage 4. They've said 6 months. And I'm kind of eavesdropping, and a little bit of tears coming out of her eyes. And her friend's like, it's okay, my brother's living over in Belgium, and it's going to be really hard on mom and all this kind of stuff. But, we're rallying around. He goes in on Monday. He's got some more scans. And I think he's starting chemo on Wednesday and all this. And I just sat there, and I was just listening. And I just went, that's mad. 4 years ago, my mother died of cancer, right? Stage 4 cancer. And for some reason inside me, I got out of my chair, finished my coffee, put my bag on me, and I just walked over and I said, I'm really sorry. This is on Saturday now. I'm really sorry. I was hearing your conversation where you talked about your dad having stage 4 cancer. I said, look, I lost my mum to cancer a few years ago, and I'm very sorry that you're going through it. But the only thing I would ever say to you is what I did with my mother was make sure that she was the most important person, and that her journey to the end was she was loved and listened to, make loads of videos and have a great laugh with her. And I'm very sorry that's happening. And she just broke down crying. And her friend who was next to her said, oh, I'm really sorry about your mum. I said, no, it's okay, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. But I walked away. I don't know to this day did I do the right thing or the wrong thing. But I just felt I wanted to tell her that,
I think you did
what to do, like it's okay, go and make memories and have fun. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, I suppose it's very different to what you could have, but I just felt like I wanted to see if I could help her or give her some advice. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know, they thanked me as I left and stuff like that.
Right,
and I got a bit of a kick out of that, from doing that.
So my Linda had clinical depression many, many years ago. So the thing that really helped, the person who really, really helped her was the community psychiatric nurse, because she sat in our kitchen with Linda, had a cup of tea. And she said, basically, you have to go on the journey to get better, but you're not the first to go on the journey, and you're not going to walk it alone, because I'll be coming with you.
Yeah.
And you basically did that for that woman.
I just told her, people sitting next to you in your coffee shop, I've gone through it. You
you're
get
not
through
the
it.
first.
You're not the first, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a journey, and you'll get through it.
Yeah. It's tough, man. It's tough.
No, but it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Mike, the future now of Storm, what do you think potentially we're in a lot of trouble?
I think it's, I don't think I've ever been as pessimistic about the future. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to eat my words.
Did you see Jeffrey at the Johnny Sexton event? Did you speak to him? Did you ever look over and go, are we going in next week? What's the crack? Are we coming back Monday? Tuesday? Let me know. DM me.
No, I don't think I spoke to him there, but I have spoken to him recently. Yeah. And, it's... Leadership's a very difficult thing when your party's split, and the DUP are more publicly split than they have been in the 40+ years they've been around. So yeah, I'm not optimistic, but I don't want to bore your listeners, your viewers, and
you never know what'll happen. Hopefully, we might get a nice Christmas present. That'll be a bit of a breakthrough,
We might do, and
it takes as Naomi Long said to me when I chatted to her, because we need brave people now to stand up and get things done, and push things forward. You know what I mean?
Well, at a meeting today with Ulster Rugby, and I'm a big fan, and
Did you get to France at all?
I didn't. No.
I booked to go to the final.
Did you?
Yeah. Obviously, I cancelled it.
Well, I was booked to go to a Belfast city centre hotel. We went ahead anyway, but wasn't the same thing.
Yeah. Did you go and watch the Six Nations? Did you go down to Dublin to watch any of the home national?
I was down for the England match for the Grand Slam, and I'll go down to one this time. Yeah, and every time I go to Dublin, I will, for a rugby international. I remember my first boss, the late great Joy Williams. Now this was a woman who became head of BBC Sport in the 1970s. You know, when it was a male, testosterone-filled, misogynistic. Well, you think now about, you know, Jimmy Savile and the rest.
Yeah.
What an achievement. She became head of sport. She had an incredibly deep voice. It was actually about an octave deeper than her husband. So the worst thing that could happen to you was that you had to phone her at home. Because in those days, people would answer the phone and you'd say, Belfast 750-328. So you got a few syllables to figure out, you know, man or woman. Joy and Ken just would pick up the phone and say, hello. 2 syllables. Make your mind up. Is it Ken or is it Joy?
Yeah.
And God help you if you got it wrong.
Oh, wow.
So Joy went to every rugby international in Dublin. And she came in one Monday morning and she phoned Jury's Hotel. And she said, I've done a very stupid thing. I was at the ball after the match on Saturday. And I've left my favourite little black dress, my little cocktail dress, in the wardrobe of room 411. Could you get it sent up? And apparently the guy from Jury said, absolutely, we send a van up once a week to Sawyers and places to get provisions. So just give me your home address and we'll get the dress dropped off. And Joy said, well, darling, I live it in the country. Very difficult to find. Tradespeople find it difficult and very frustrating. Much easier if you just get your man to drop it off here to the BBC. And there's a pause at the other end. And then the man says, I understand perfectly, sir.
Whoa, did she say anything?
She told that against herself, yeah.
Wow, that's mad. And when was she the boss that really made a big impact on you, do you think?
Oh, totally, yeah. She really encouraged young talent. You know, George Hamilton, who was with RTE for many years. Mark Robson. Yes. Alan Green.
I think I know him, yeah.
Yeah, Jim Neely.
So, I suppose when you have a boss like that, when you went into politics, was she still around? Did you keep in touch with her and stuff? Or?
No, Joy's gone.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really impressed me was she said, you know, we will do rotas, but I expect if there's work to be done, I expect you to be here to do it. And when there isn't work to be done, I don't care whether you're on the rota or not, I expect you to be on the golf course.
There you go, yeah. She kind of made you that responsibility to manage yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, to be responsible.
Be responsible, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mike Nesbitt, MLA for Strangford, thanks very much for coming into Cork in the North. I'm not going to lie, guys. I was absolutely terrified about chatting to you because I like you a lot and I admire you. And I normally sit here and just chat nonsense with other comedians, you know what I mean? But I had done research on you. I didn't even ask the questions I wanted to ask because I thought, sometimes when we get people on here who are, you know, people of interest that I really want to speak to and I'm trying to learn and stuff like that, I go off and I do a big deep dive and I do all this kind of stuff and I've got questions here and I have this question here about rugby, the policing board for the PSN. I've all these questions for you. I thought we'll just see how it goes and then I might jump in if I get stuck. But thanks very much for coming on Cork in the North podcast. You're our second MLA that we've had. Still no reply from certain other parties. Don't worry, we're not going to badge you like Mike did, but we do appreciate you coming on.
You're welcome.
Has it been okay? You don't mind?
Yeah.
Some people come on to come to a comedian's podcast. I think it's going to be an awful time and stuff like that. But we don't kind of do it like that. With the other comedians, we have the crack and stuff like that. But to everybody, thanks so much for joining us this week. To Mike Nesbitt as well, MLA for Strangford. We really do appreciate his time. Come over his busy schedule. I know he's just come up here from Stormont as well to chat to us. Also, join up to the Patreon. Come to the live show Sunday the 10th of October, 3 to 5 o'clock at the Duncairn Arts Centre. We've got some special guests for you. We've only got about 25 tickets left before it sells out. And this week, guys, you may see me at the Opera House. I'm performing all weekend in 6 shows this week at the Opera House with Shane Todd, starting So if you're coming over the weekend, you will, if you were there last weekend, you will have seen us. All right. So thanks everyone from Cork and North. We'll see you soon. Cheers.